No, I don't think I'll be shaking your hand, James Anderson said, his voice cold, his eyes never leaving Rachel Grant's face. The room seemed to freeze in that moment. The laughter from a nearby table died, and the hum of conversation slowed to a distant murmur. Rachel's hand, extended with grace and a faint smile, hovered in the air. The rejection hung heavy, as though the words themselves had physically struck her. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one dared to speak up. They just watched in silence as Rachel slowly pulled her hand back, her expression unchanged but the sting of the moment clear in her eyes. James, tall and commanding in his tailored suit, turned away, his indifference palpable. He was a man of wealth, of power. He could afford to snub anyone he wished. As he walked away, the murmur of the room resumed, but Rachel remained standing there, the cool air of the upscale hotel ballroom making the rejection feel even colder. The sparkle of champagne glasses and the polished marble floors felt like a world far removed from her own. But Rachel wasn't fazed. She had learned long ago to keep her dignity intact, even when the world seemed intent on stripping it away. She wasn't the kind of woman who needed validation from a man like him. She had her own path, her own strength. The evening continued on as if nothing had happened. But for Rachel, the night had already marked a new beginning. The sting of James's rejection was a reminder that there were still battles to fight, not just for respect, but for the recognition of her worth. And that was a fight she was willing to win. Meanwhile, James Anderson was unaware of the ripple he just set in motion. He was too wrapped up in his world, his empire, his fortune, to notice the subtle yet profound shift taking place in his heart. He had dismissed Rachel in front of others, but something nagged at him. The cool air in the room suddenly felt too oppressive, too silent, as if it were pressing down on him. He glanced back at Rachel across the room, but she was already talking to someone else, her head held high. She didn't seem to be bothered. Yet something about her stayed with him, like an echo that wouldn't fade. James wasn't used to feeling this way. The next day, fate would bring him face to face with Rachel again. But this time, he wouldn't be the one turning away. He would be the one desperate to make amends. It was an unexpected twist, and he wasn't ready for it. But in that moment, the seeds of change had already been sown. I was surprised when I saw her again. It was the next morning, and I hadn't expected to see Rachel Grant anywhere near the same circles. But there she was, standing by the window in a small cafe across the street from my office. I didn't know what drew me to her at first, whether it was the way the sunlight caught her hair or how she seemed so calm in an atmosphere filled with the hum of business professionals and high-powered meetings. It was as if nothing had shaken her resolve, not even the cold dismissal of the night before. I had been awake all night, turning over the events in my mind, the moment her hand was rejected. My own response to it had felt so automatic, so ingrained in the arrogance I'd come to rely on. But it bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I had walked away too easily, too carelessly, leaving her standing there in front of everyone. I hadn't expected her to just move on, but she did. I'd half expected her to seek some form of validation or to react in anger. Instead, she had held herself with a kind of quiet dignity that left me questioning everything. As I walked into the cafe, my heart started beating faster. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to fix what I had done. Something about Rachel made me feel as if I had missed a step in my life, as though I had taken her for granted and now, at this very moment, had a chance to right my wrong. The morning light was different here, less harsh than in the grand ballroom. And Rachel, sitting there with her coffee in front of her, seemed to glow softly, as if her presence could change the world around her. I wasn't sure if I should approach her, but something in me pushed forward. My footsteps were slow but purposeful, and before I knew it, I was standing in front of her. She didn't look up at first, her focus on the open book in front of her. I stood there for a few seconds watching her. She was beautiful in a way that wasn't about physical appearance. It was the kind of beauty that radiated from within, something I had never really understood before. But there it was. Finally, she looked up, and our eyes met. There was no anger in her gaze, just calm, almost as if she had been expecting this moment. I cleared my throat. "Rachel," I said, my voice sounding foreign to me. "I owe you an apology." Her eyes softened, but she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The weight of the words hung in the air, and I could feel them pull me towards something I wasn't sure I was ready for. "I acted out of turn yesterday. And I regret it," I continued, struggling to find the right words. "I was rude, dismissive. You didn't deserve that." There was a pause, the air between us still thick with unsaid things. "I'm sorry if I hurt you," I said, my voice softer now. She finally nodded, slowly, as though considering my words. Then she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "It's not about your apology," she said, her eyes meeting mine once more. "It's about what you learned from this." I didn't know what to say to that. The weight of her statement settled over me like a blanket, heavy and pressing, but not unpleasant. It made me uncomfortable in a way that felt right. I hadn't come here expecting an answer or a solution. I came here because I knew that what had happened yesterday wasn't just about a simple handshake. It was about respect. And I needed to learn that. Rachel took a sip of her coffee and looked out the window, as if she had already moved on from the conversation. But I wasn't done. "What if I want to learn?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned her gaze back to me, a small, knowing smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Then maybe you'll start by actually listening." Her words hit me harder than I expected. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the stirrings of something I had long buried, the desire to be better, to do better. It wasn't going to be easy, but at least now I knew where to start. The next few days felt like a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about what Rachel had said to me in the cafe. Actually listening. It echoed in my mind at odd moments. Every time I caught myself lost in the usual routine of meetings and deals, I remembered her words. I began to notice the small things, the way people spoke, the way they looked at me, the things they didn't say. I had always been quick to make judgments, quick to assume. But now, there was something different, something new. I couldn't pinpoint it, but it felt like the first real shift in my life in a long time. I decided to make an effort, to really pay attention to the world around me and the people in it. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Rachel had given me a glimpse of something I hadn't truly understood before. And for the first time, I was curious to know more. The following week, I attended another event, a charity gala this time. The venue was grand, with gold chandeliers that cast a warm glow over the crowd. But as I walked into the room, I saw her again. Rachel was standing near the corner, talking to a few guests. She looked effortless, her presence commanding yet subtle. There was no grand entrance, no showy display of wealth. She was just there, standing confidently, in a simple black dress that suited her perfectly. I hesitated for a moment before walking toward her. As I approached, she noticed me. Her eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, there was no awkwardness. No tension. Just understanding. She smiled slightly, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were already forgiven without needing to say a word. I was about to speak when she beat me to it. "You didn't have to come," she said softly, her voice calm and measured. "I know," I replied, surprised by the honesty in my own words. "But I wanted to." She raised an eyebrow, almost as if to say, "Why?" And I found myself answering honestly, without hesitation. "Because I realized I was wrong. And I think I need to change." Rachel nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. "You don't need to change for me," she said. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," I replied. "But it's not about you. It's about me understanding something I didn't before." She tilted her head, as though considering my words. There was a silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was as though we both knew this conversation had to happen, but neither of us was rushing to finish it. Then, after a moment, she spoke again, her tone softer this time. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, James. Least of all to me." Her words felt like a balm to a wound I hadn't even realized was there. It was as if I had been carrying this weight around without knowing it, and now, standing here, I was finally allowed to put it down. But I want to, I said, a quiet resolve settling in. I need to. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to admit that. You'll figure it out, she said, offering me a small smile that was both understanding and encouraging. I stood there, a sense of peace washing over me. There was no more need to prove myself to her or anyone else. I just needed to do the work, to find the person I was meant to be. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, but I didn't mind. I wasn't concerned with the usual talk of business or appearances. My thoughts kept returning to Rachel's words, to the way she had spoken to me with such sincerity, and to the realization that my life, my purpose, wasn't about wealth or status. It was about learning to listen, truly listen, to the world around me. By the time the gala ended, I found myself leaving with a sense of calm I had never felt before. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I knew one thing for sure. I had a long road ahead of me, but at least now, I knew where to start. The days that followed were a mix of reflection and small steps forward. I couldn't get Rachel out of my mind. Her presence, her words, her quiet dignity, it all stayed with me, like a compass that had suddenly pointed me in a direction I hadn't considered before. I found myself questioning the choices I'd made, the things I had once taken for granted. I wasn't sure what kind of change I was supposed to make, but I knew I couldn't go back to the person I had been. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to. I had been a man used to control over my company, over my reputation, over every little detail of my life. But control didn't matter anymore. Not like this. I started listening more, paying attention to things I had never noticed before. The way people spoke, the way they acted, their hopes and fears. I heard stories that once would have passed me by, and for the first time, I truly understood them. The realization was simple yet profound. I had been blind to the lives around me, too caught up in my own world to see anything else. One evening, I decided to call Rachel. I hadn't expected much, perhaps a brief conversation, maybe an apology, but nothing more. What surprised me was how easily the words came when I spoke to her. I found myself being more honest than I had ever been. Rachel, I began. I've been thinking about what you said. About learning to listen. I don't think I truly understood what that meant until now. There was a pause on the other end of the line, but it wasn't uncomfortable. I could almost feel her waiting, as if she knew this moment would come. It's not easy, she said softly. Learning to listen. Not just with your ears, but with your heart. It takes time. I know, I replied. But I want to try. I want to understand. I don't want to be the man I was before. You don't have to change all at once, Rachel said. Just take it one step at a time. That's all anyone can do. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on fixing everything, on making a grand gesture, but the truth was, change didn't come in one big moment. It came in small, consistent actions. I wasn't going to change overnight, but I could start by listening. And that's what I did. Over the next few weeks, I made an effort to be more present. At work, I started asking more questions. I listened to my employees' ideas, their concerns, their personal stories. It was amazing how much I had missed before, how much had been right in front of me. And at home, I did the same. I listened to my family, to the people who cared about me. I had spent so many years focused on achieving more that I had forgotten what really mattered. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I found myself sitting on my balcony, thinking about everything that had happened. My mind kept returning to Rachel, how she had opened my eyes, how she had been the catalyst for all this change. I wasn't sure where this new path would lead me, but I felt more at peace than I had in years. My phone buzzed, and when I looked at the screen, I saw Rachel's name. I smiled before answering. Rachel, I said. How's it going? Better than expected, she replied, her voice warm and familiar. I've been watching you. You've been making progress. Her words made me pause. You've been watching me? I asked, a little surprised. Not in a creepy way. She laughed. But I've noticed a change. You've been listening. And that means something. I felt a warmth spread through me at her words. For the first time, I realized that change wasn't just about me. It was about the connections I made, the way I treated the world around me. Thanks, Rachel, I said, my voice softer than I had intended. It's been a process, but I think I'm finally getting it. I'm proud of you, she said simply, and for a moment I felt like I had finally earned something real. In the days that followed, I continued on this new path, listening more, being present more, and living with more intention. I wasn't perfect, and I wasn't pretending to be, but I was learning. Slowly, but surely, I was becoming the person I had always wanted to be. And through it all, Rachel's presence was a steady reminder of what it meant to truly see the world, to hear it, and to understand it. As I continued to grow, I knew there was still more to learn, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had taken the first step, and I was ready for whatever came next. The weeks passed, and as each day unfolded, I found myself embracing this new version of me, one who was no longer blinded by the need to be the best, the richest, or the most powerful. I was learning to be present, to listen, and to truly see the world around me, not just through the lens of success, but through the eyes of others. I had changed, but I knew there was still a long way to go. And that's when I saw her again. It was an unexpected encounter. I was in a quiet cafe, tucked away in a corner booth with my laptop open, trying to catch up on emails. The hum of conversation filled the room, but my mind was elsewhere, lost in a sea of thoughts. And then, just as I looked up, I saw her. Rachel, sitting alone at a table near the window, her presence somehow still commanding in the most subtle of ways. She hadn't noticed me yet, and I almost wanted to let her remain unaware for just a moment longer. There was something peaceful about watching her, the way she had this calm aura, like she was at ease with herself in a world that often made no sense. But before I could go back to my work, she caught my eye. The smallest of smiles tugged at the corners of her lips, and I felt something stir in me. She was different, in the way she could make you feel seen without saying a word. James, she said, her voice warm, and somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had been waiting for this moment as much as I had. Rachel, I replied, standing up, unsure of what to say. The hesitation between us was there, but it wasn't awkward. It was more like two people meeting again after a long time, both aware of the distance they had traveled, but neither afraid to take the next step forward. She gestured to the empty chair across from her, inviting me to join her. I took a deep breath and sat down. How have you been? She asked, her eyes searching mine. I paused for a moment, the question simple but somehow heavy with meaning. Better, I said. I've been better. And it's not just because of work or anything like that. It's because I've been thinking, really thinking, about everything. Rachel nodded, not rushing me. She was used to people needing time. I can tell, she said softly. You're different. I smiled, but it wasn't a boastful smile, it was a smile of acknowledgement. I know, I said, leaning forward slightly. And I think I owe it to you for helping me realize that. The words came out more easily than I had expected. Rachel's gaze softened. I didn't do anything, she said with a slight shrug. You did the work. All I did was show you that it was possible to see things differently. It felt strange to hear her say that. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate her humility, but there was a part of me that knew the truth. Her words, her actions, her example, they had been a mirror. A mirror that showed me the parts of myself I had been hiding from. And for the first time, I was ready to face them. We spent the next hour talking, not about business or achievements, but about life, about the small things that had always been there but had gone unnoticed. The conversations I had been too busy to have. The questions I had been too afraid to ask. Rachel listened, really listened, and as I spoke, I realized how much I had been holding in. I told her about my childhood, about growing up in a family that valued success above all else, and how I had spent years chasing that success at the cost of everything else. I told her about my loneliness, my fears, my insecurities. And she didn't judge me. She didn't try to offer solutions or quick fixes. She just listened. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental, that listening, really listening, was more powerful than I had ever imagined. It was the key to connection, to understanding, and to change. When we finished our conversation, I felt lighter, as if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted. Rachel had given me something invaluable, the freedom to speak without fear, without needing to impress, and without needing to prove anything to anyone. I didn't know what the future held, or what kind of person I would become in the days to come. But I knew one thing: I wasn't the man I used to be. And that was a good place to start. The days that followed felt like a slow awakening, each one revealing more about myself than I had ever expected. Rachel's words echoed in my mind, and though I had taken steps to listen, to understand, I knew that the real challenge was just beginning. I had changed in small ways, but the bigger shifts were still ahead. I had so much to learn, and the path forward wasn't going to be easy. But I was ready for it. It was late one afternoon when I found myself once again in the same cafe where Rachel and I had spoken weeks earlier. The familiar scent of fresh coffee and the soft buzz of conversations in the background were comforting in their routine, yet something inside me felt different. I wasn't here to just pass time or hide behind the distractions of emails and meetings. I was here for something more, something I hadn't fully understood until now. The door to the cafe swung open, and in walked Rachel. She was dressed simply, but there was something powerful about the way she carried herself. Her presence seemed to fill the room in the most effortless way. It wasn't just her beauty, it was her confidence, her comfort in being exactly who she was. And in that moment I realized how much I admired her. How much I still had to learn from her. She spotted me across the room and gave me a small nod, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. I waved her over, my heart suddenly racing in a way I hadn't expected. As she approached, I felt an unexpected nervousness, a feeling that I hadn't experienced in a long time. But it wasn't a bad feeling. It was the feeling of knowing that I was standing at the edge of something new, something challenging, something important. "James," she greeted, sitting down across from me. Her eyes were warm, but there was a quiet wisdom in them that made me feel both seen and challenged. "How are you doing?" she asked, her voice soft yet probing. I hesitated before answering. "I'm trying," I said. "I've made progress, but there's still so much more to do." "That's the key," she said, nodding. "It's about progress, not perfection." Her words resonated with me deeply. I had spent so much of my life chasing perfection, chasing results, chasing success, that I had forgotten what it was like to simply be in the moment, to embrace the small wins along the way. "What about you?" I asked. "How are you doing?" She paused for a moment, looking down at her coffee before meeting my gaze. Again. "I'm good," she said simply. "But I'm learning, too. I don't have all the answers. I'm still figuring things out, just like you." Her honesty was refreshing, and it made me realize that no one, no matter how much they seemed to have it together, had all the answers. We were all figuring it out as we went. We talked for hours that afternoon, about life, about work, about the things that scared us, and the things that made us hopeful. There was no rush, no need to impress or prove anything. Just two people sharing their stories, their fears, and their dreams. And in that conversation, I felt a shift inside me, a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly connect with someone, to really listen, and to let yourself be vulnerable. As the conversation wound down and the cafe began to empty, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in a long time. The world hadn't changed, but I had. And that was enough for now. Rachel stood to leave, and I followed her to the door. "I'm glad we talked," I said, my voice sincere. "Me too," she replied with a smile. "Keep going, James. You're on the right path." I watched her walk away, her figure slowly disappearing into the busy street. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I didn't know exactly where this journey would take me, but I knew I was on the right path. It wasn't about finding all the answers or reaching some finish line. It was about listening, about learning, and about being present in the moments that mattered most. I had started to understand that, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. As the weeks went on, I found myself in a place I hadn't expected, one that was quieter, more reflective, but also strangely peaceful. I was no longer driven by the usual rush of meetings, deadlines, and the constant hunger for more. Instead, I began to focus on the little things, on the people around me, on the moments that had always passed me by in my previous life. The change wasn't immediate, and it wasn't always easy, but it was real. And each day, I felt myself inching closer to the man I wanted to be. One evening, as I sat in my office overlooking the city skyline, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something urged me to pick it up. "Hello?" I said, my voice calm, but curious. "James," the voice on the other end said. "It's Rachel." A smile tugged at my lips. I hadn't heard from her in a few weeks, and yet hearing her voice now felt like a gentle reminder of everything I had been learning. "Rachel," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "It's good to hear from you." "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady, but with a touch of something deeper, something more thoughtful. "About everything. And I think it's time we had that conversation." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What conversation?" "The one where we both admit that we've changed. That we're not the same people we were when we first met." Her words hit me like a wave, soft but powerful. It was true, everything had shifted, not just for me, but for her too. We had both been on separate journeys, but somehow, our paths had crossed at the right time. "I think you're right," I said, my voice thoughtful. "I've been doing a lot of reflecting. A lot of listening." "Good," she said, a hint of approval in her tone. "That's exactly what I've been hoping for. Change doesn't happen overnight, James. But it starts with one moment, one decision, and then it builds from there." "I've learned that," I said quietly. "But I still don't have all the answers. I don't think I ever will." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel her smiling, even though we were miles apart. "No one does," she said softly. "But it's not about having all the answers. It's about being open to the process. About being willing to learn and grow, even when it's difficult." Her words were simple, yet they resonated with me in a way I hadn't expected. It was the kind of wisdom that could only come from someone who had lived through their own struggles and come out the other side stronger. "I've been trying to do that," I said. "Trying to let go of the need to control everything, to have all the answers. It's not easy, but it's been worth it. It will continue to be worth it," Rachel said. "You just have to trust the journey." We talked for a while longer, about life, about work, about the small things that made up our days. It wasn't the kind of conversation that offered immediate answers or solutions. But it was the kind of conversation that felt real, like two people who had been through their own struggles, yet had found a way to connect on a deeper level. By the time we hung up, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. The world still felt overwhelming at times, but I no longer felt like I had to figure it all out on my own. I had learned the value of listening, not just to others, but to myself as well. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't alone in this. Rachel had been a guiding force in my life, and though our paths were different, we had both come to understand that growth didn't happen in isolation. It happened through connection, through vulnerability, and through the willingness to see the world differently. The next day, I woke up with a sense of calm I hadn't known in a long time. It was a quiet confidence, the kind that came not from knowing all the answers, but from being okay with not knowing. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Months passed, and as the seasons changed, so did I. It was a transformation that felt slow and subtle, like the soft unfolding of a flower, but it was real. The man I had been, driven, cold, and isolated, seemed like a distant memory, replaced by someone who was learning to live with more intention, more compassion. I had built a life of success and achievement, but in the end, I had realized that none of it mattered if I didn't have the ability to connect with others. Rachel had shown me that. One afternoon, as I sat in my office looking out over the city, I felt the familiar pull to reach out to her. It wasn't out of obligation or expectation, but because I wanted to. I had something I needed to say. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. When she answered, her voice was warm, as if she had been expecting the call. "James," she said, her tone calm and inviting. "How are you?" "Better," I replied, my voice steady but with a hint of emotion. "I've been thinking a lot about everything we've talked about. About the changes I've been trying to make." "And?" she asked, her voice gentle but encouraging. "I think I finally get it," I said, my heart lighter with every word. "It's not about being perfect. It's about being honest. With myself, with others. It's about listening, and truly seeing the people around me." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I wondered if I had said too much. But then Rachel spoke, her voice soft but strong. "I'm proud of you, James," she said. "It's not easy to change, but you've made real progress. And that's what matters." Her words filled me with a warmth I hadn't expected. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling too small for what I was feeling. "I couldn't have done it without you." She laughed softly. "You did the work, James. You just needed someone to show you that it was possible." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I'll never forget that," I said. "You've changed my life." There was a long pause, and then Rachel spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "You've changed your life, James. I just helped you see it." Her words were a reminder that the power to change had always been inside me. Rachel hadn't given me anything I didn't already have, she had simply shown me the way. We talked for a while longer, about life, about the things that mattered, and about the path ahead. As the conversation ended, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I wasn't done changing, but I was no longer afraid of it. I was no longer afraid of the unknown, or of the work it would take to continue growing. The next day, I found myself standing at the window of my office, watching the city go about its business. I had the same view I'd always had, but today it felt different. I no longer saw it through the lens of ambition or success. I saw it as a world filled with possibilities, with people to connect with, to listen to, and to understand. And in that moment, I realized that this was the life I had been searching for all along, not the life of achievement and accolades, but the life of true connection. The life that was still being written. As the days passed, I found myself seeking out opportunities to connect with the people around me in ways I hadn't before. I listened more, spoke less, and allowed myself to be vulnerable in ways that had once seemed terrifying. I reached out to old friends, reconnected with family, and even made new connections with people I had never expected to meet. And with each new relationship, I felt more whole, more at peace with who I was becoming. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't need to. I had learned that it was okay to not have everything figured out, that the journey itself was just as important as the destination. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present. And as I walked down this path, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. It was a quiet morning when I realized that the journey I had embarked on wasn't just about personal growth anymore. It had become something more meaningful, something that could extend beyond myself. I had spent so many years focused on my own success, my own goals, but now, I found myself wondering how I could impact the world around me. I sat at my desk, staring out the window, and thought about everything that had happened. How far I had come from the man I used to be, the man who thought success was measured by wealth, power, and control. Now I understood that true success wasn't about the things I could accumulate, but the connections I could build, the lives I could touch, and the person I could become. I had Rachel to thank for that. Her words, her actions, and her unwavering belief in me had changed the course of my life in ways I had never anticipated. But I wasn't done yet. I knew that there was still so much to learn, and the road ahead was far from easy. But for the first time, I was excited about what the future held. It wasn't the future I had once imagined, a future filled with corporate meetings and high-stakes deals. It was a different kind of future. One where I could make a real difference. I picked up my phone and sent Rachel a message. I've been thinking a lot about everything. And I've realized something. I want to do more than just talk about change. I want to be a part of it. I want to help others the way you helped me. The message wasn't perfect. It wasn't grandiose or filled with fancy words. It was just honest. I knew that the journey ahead would require effort, humility, and dedication. But I was ready. And I knew Rachel would understand. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with her reply. That's exactly what I've been hoping to hear from you. The world needs more people who are willing to make a difference. And I believe you have it in you to do just that. Her words were like a light shining through the fog, guiding me toward the path I needed to take. It wasn't just about doing something for myself anymore. It was about doing something for others. For the people who were still stuck in the same cycle I had been in, chasing success at the cost of everything else. I didn't have all the answers, and I wasn't sure how I would make a difference. But I knew I had to start somewhere. Over the next few weeks, I took small steps. I reached out to people in my community, offering help, offering my time. I began volunteering at local organizations, listening to people's stories, and learning about the challenges they faced. It wasn't easy, and at times it felt like I was just scratching the surface of a much bigger issue. But each conversation, each small act of kindness, reminded me that change didn't have to be monumental. It could start with one person, one act, one conversation at a time. As I continued this journey, I felt a sense of fulfillment I had never experienced before. It wasn't the kind of fulfillment that came from a business deal or an achievement on paper. It was the kind that came from knowing that I was doing something that mattered. Something real. I didn't know where this path would lead, but I was no longer afraid of the uncertainty. I knew that as long as I kept listening, kept learning, and kept helping, I would be on the right track. And as I thought about everything Rachel had taught me, I realized that the true power of change wasn't in the destination. It was in the journey itself. The people we meet, the lives we touch, the moments we share, that's where the real magic happens. And with that thought, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't done yet. But I was ready for whatever came next.